Marketers don't need to be that meme of that guy, and this is just like what I keep picturing. That's like surrounded by a bunch of different red strings, trying to connect like every possible dot to every possible data point about what they know about something. They just need to meet students where they are and give them the answer that they actually need when they need it.
Hey, welcome to the Higher Ed Storytelling University podcast, a show where we bring together Marcom leaders from both inside and outside higher ed to give you fresh perspectives on successful organic content creation and strategy in higher education. My name is John Azoni. I'm the founder at UNVEILD, a video production company working specifically with colleges on their storytelling and commercial video content. You can learn more about our work at unveiled.tv. That's UNVEILD. And if creating content that resonates emotionally with your audience is a priority for you, then you need to be subscribed to the Higher Ed Storytellers Digest. It's my weekly newsletter where we cover a lot of ground about content creation and strategy in higher ed. So sign up for that for free at unveiled.tv/newsletter. All right, let's get on with the show. All right, my guest today is Erin Fields. Erin is the marketing director at Ologie. She leads the agency's content and thought leadership and spends her days helping higher ed sound less like a committee meeting and more like a conversation worth having, which, Erin, bless your heart for that. We all appreciate it. A proud Marshall University and West Virginia University alum, she credits her Appalachian roots for keeping her grounded in honesty and heart. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so you have Appalachian roots. Where are the roots from?
Yeah, so I born and raised in West Virginia, and now I live in Kansas City, but, I always think back about my home and how it shaped me, and, I don't know if anybody else out there is from West Virginia, but believe me, whether I know you or not, we now have a tight bond, so if you're listening, go Mountaineers.
And you all like John Denver, right?
Oh, yeah, Country Roads.
That's a good song. Once in a while, I'll just put on some like random like yacht rock or like some, like Hall & Oates or like John Denver, just something that my parents would have listened to. And I'm like, man, as you get older, this stuff just becomes like super jamming.
It is quite literally our state anthem, pretty much so.
Interesting. Okay, so, we always start off on a tangent here. So what's something that people might be surprised to know about you?
Oh man, okay. I'm sure some people are probably going to feel nostalgic about this based on especially if you're like my age. People are usually surprised to find out that I play Pokemon cards in a competitive format. So it started as a nostalgia thing for me because I've loved Pokemon since I was a kid, but over the last few years, it's really kind of became my main hobby. So I play locally at my local game store here in Kansas City, but I also travel for tournaments. So I was just in Milwaukee a few weeks ago, and honestly, it's been such a fun community to be a part of, and it's taken me to cities that honestly I probably wouldn't have gone to otherwise. So it was super fun. I loved Milwaukee. Now I want to go back there more than just for Pokemon. So it's just something that people usually don't know about me, and they're like, oh, that's kind of nerdy, but that's also cool.
That is really cool. Are you like a grandmaster level Pokemon?
I wish. I don't have the time to dedicate to be a grandmaster in Pokemon, but I wish I did.
I don't know anything about Pokemon, but I know that there's some coveted cards. I equate it to Pogs when I was in 5th grade. There were certain Pogs that you'd want, and you get the ones that were glittery with the Pog character on it. That was you were jumping for joy. What's your favorite Pokemon card that you own?
My favorite Pokemon card that I own, so my favorite Pokemon is called Miltank, and it's like a little cow. So I don't know why that's my favorite Pokemon, it just is. But these tournaments are just crazy. If you're not involved in the scene, and I told you that there's 3,000 people at these tournaments, it's just whoa, someone outside thinks that kind of stuff is niche, and it is, but for something so niche to have 3,000 people at a tournament, it's just oh, okay, there's a lot of people that's interested in this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because you have little kids playing, but then you also I've played against people at tournaments and they're 65 or 70 years old.
Wow.
It's yeah, I know, right? It's crazy.
That's cool. I mean, they have like whole tournaments for like people that do Rubik's cubes like really fast.
There's a tournament for everything these days, yeah.
Hobby horse jumping or whatever. That's my favorite. Where they're like, I'm like, this is literally a tournament for people with a horse head on a stick pretending to ride a horse, and apparently some do it better than others.
I now know my next hobby I'm chasing. Great.
So you recently joined Ologie. You were at Enrollify before that. You're joining us as part of our unofficial LinkedIn Bangers series, and you talk a lot about admissions related things, which I noticed. So give us a little history of, kind of like your journey in higher ed.
Yeah, so I post a lot about admissions because honestly, that's really where I built my foundation. My foundation originally, even though that my major in college was advertising, but right out of the gate, I did not have a solely marketing job. It's always been admissions and recruitment. So before I joined Ologie and Enrollify in the past, my first job out of college was being a graduate assistant at the graduate admissions department at West Virginia University. And then I moved into a full-time role in that department as well. And that experience, I feel like, completely shaped how I think about marketing now, further on in my career. So I started on the front lines in that job. And so I was meeting with prospective students and I was answering their emails. I was giving presentations. I was doing campus tours. Like I was hosting webinars. So I did like all of that frontline stuff. And I was talking to people who were in all very different stages of life. So in grad school, you have some people that they're going to grad school and they've just finished undergrad. You have some people who have maybe been out of school for 10 plus years and they want to go back to school. We'd have like international students who were trying to navigate a system that just like did not make any sense to them whatsoever, and they needed help going through that process. And so I think what really stuck with me was how inconsistent and confusing the higher ed experience was when I was talking with all of these people. And so like I remember talking to students and they didn't even know that you could fill out the FAFSA for graduate school. They thought it was just an undergraduate thing. Like they just had no idea. And that's not even on them of not knowing. That's on us as higher education professionals for not creating content that actually meets people where they are, right? And so I feel like that kind of work gave me a lot of empathy. I heard people's stories every day, their career pivots, their doubts, their motivations, and it just really made me realize that higher ed marketing has to be personal. And you can't take a one-size-fits-all approach to your audience that is that diverse. And so even though I've now moved out of admissions and I've crossed into agency life and agency work, I still carry that perspective with me every day, even though I'm doing the work that I am now. I'm always thinking about the other person on the other side, and that mindset really came from being in rooms with students, and I don't want to lose that no matter what audience I'm working with.
Love that. And you recently started getting pretty consistent on LinkedIn. I know there's a few people, I mean, at least, Dake Builds and some others at Ologie that kind of have their own like thought leadership, brands going on LinkedIn from Ologie, and you have joined the ranks. So tell me about your LinkedIn journey recently.
The Ologie ranks, I love it. First, shout out to my girl Day. She's great. If you don't follow her on LinkedIn, you're missing out. She's also got a newsletter. That's fantastic. But getting consistent on LinkedIn for me was really intentional. I had been at this point in higher ed for a while, and I've never not been in the higher ed sector in some way, whether that's actually being at a university or that's not. I've always been connected to higher ed in some way. And so at this point in my career, I really felt like I had a seat at the table, and that came with the question of like, okay, well, what am I doing with this seat now? And I knew that I wanted to build a platform and not just to share what I learned, but I feel like really to connect with other people that were doing the same work with me. And so I've always valued learning from people that were ahead of me on an org chart, but also from peers. And then honestly, the folks that were earlier in their careers as well. I really believe that everyone has something to bring to the table and that learning should go in all directions, no matter where you are in your career. And so I feel like that really pushed me to get active on LinkedIn because I was exposing myself to a lot of different people in my network. So for a long time, I actually didn't post because I thought I needed to be a little bit further along in my career. Like I don't know, I would think about my experiences, but then I would compare myself to someone else who's been in the field for a long time, and I'd be like, well, who am I to talk about this yet when I've only got, I don't know, like 5 years under my belt at that point or something. But eventually I kind of just realized, I woke up one day and I was just like, you know what? Like, I don't need to have everything figured out to just contribute. There's a lot of value in sharing what you know, why you're still learning something, and people seeing that kind of transparency of what you're learning. So I started posting more, especially thinking about reflecting on my time in admissions and the conversations that I used to have with students. Something that I'm really passionate about, which we're going to get into this episode, is just having authentic content that genuinely has value and builds trust. And funnily enough, like, that's the stuff that really resonated with me, like the honest and trenches moments that I experienced throughout my career. And so since then, I feel like my LinkedIn has really become more than just a place to share ideas, but it's also helped me stay connected with people in the space. I've met so many freaking smart and thoughtful people, between marketers, creatives, admissions people, all that are trying to make higher ed a better place, and how can we learn from each other. And it really keeps me sharp. It forces me to really slow down and articulate what I'm seeing, what I'm reading, what I'm posting about, what I'm learning, what I'm thinking about the work that I'm doing, which I feel like has made me better in my role at Ologie too. So yeah, I mean, to sum all that up, I think LinkedIn's really become a space where I want to go to become a learner and a peer and a contributor all at one time. And that's something that I want to keep showing up for.
That's great. And what I love about your posts is that you have a strong point of view. And that's my favorite people on LinkedIn to follow. And I feel like I say this every episode, but like, there are not enough people that really understand how to use LinkedIn. I think they're still using it as like 2010 LinkedIn, where it's like a kind of just a place to post your links to your blogs and say, hey, go over here and check this out. Or like, hey, we're hiring. That's all fine. But I think, like, when you're a marketing director somewhere and you've got clients that, like on the agency side, that are kind of relying on you to have a point of view and how to guide them, I think really builds trust. I think it builds trust for the Ologie brand, and it builds a sense of trust and security, I think, with people that work with you. It's like, okay, this person actually gets it, and she has a way of doing things, a way of advising, and a way of thinking that, is going to take us from A to Z.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, I saw a major flood of your posts start coming into my feed. And I remember I was commenting, like, the first one, I was like, this is a bar. And then the next one, it was like, another bar, which in, young people terms means this is good. You're dropping bars, you're dropping, versus whatever, I don't know, rap culture.
Yeah, that's so funny that you mentioned that. I remember that day, and then I remember not too long after that I had another one, and you were like, this is a second bar, or something like that. It was like great to me, because I had seen you obviously around the podcast, and so to me, you're someone in the industry that's also a trusted voice. And so I was like, oh, okay, like my stuff is getting some kind of traction and resonance with people, and so it was great. But to your point, it's good to see LinkedIn, like you said, people not using it for simply like, hey, I got a new job, or hey, I'm looking for something. And not that people can't use it for that, but it's cool to see the evolution of LinkedIn, even from, 5 or 10 years ago, when people were only using it for those purposes.
Yeah. When you think videographer, you probably think of one person with a camera that will come film some stuff for YouTube for you. When you think commercial, you probably think like this separate big undertaking that involves an ad agency and all this stuff. But at Unveiled, guess what? We do both. You want to do some nimble documentary style storytelling? We got you. You want to create a polished, like really slick 30-second commercial to stream on Hulu with professional actors and set design and a director that yells action, and there's like a whole table that's just filled with like free bagels and snacks and coffee all day long. Guess what? We got you there too. And it would not be our first rodeo. We've done some rodeos. We can get this done for you anywhere in the US without the travel costs that would come along with flying a 20-person crew out. So don't feel like you have to be limited by your location with who you hire for a project like this. So head over to unveiled.tv/commercials to see some of our commercial work, as well as behind the scenes content. And you can book a call with me to chat further right there on our website. All right, back to the show. We'll unpack a handful of your bangers here, but
What was like the first posts where you realized people were starting to respond? Like your efforts looked like to be consistent were starting to work?
That's a good question. I think the first post that I feel like really seemed to land was one where I said that university blogs have a bit of a we problem. And what I meant by that was that you have blogs that like to be, or institutions that like to say, like we offer this, or we believe this, or we're proud of this. And so you start reading and it feels more like a press release than something an actual student would be searching or Googling or chat GPTing. And I think that one resonated because it was calling out something that I think a lot of people had noticed, but maybe hadn't said out loud. And so it sparked some really good conversations about what it really means to write for students and not just internal stakeholders. But I'll be honest, sharing your voice online is a very humbling experience. For every post that pops off like that one, there are others where it's just like, yeah, that's crickets. And you kind of just hit post and you move on with your day. But I mean, like, that's part of it. You have to be okay with showing up in whatever way that looks like for you. And the important part is honestly just staying in rhythm and using your voice when it matters.
Yeah, for every hit that I get, which is few and far between, there's a lot of duds. One, I had a dud yesterday. I think I posted. I was like in the morning. I was like, oh, this is good. Like I'm like post this. This should get some legs. And like, I'm not even joking. Zero engagement to the point where LinkedIn like sent me one of those notifications that's like, hey, no one's engaging with your post here. Do you want to maybe like tag
Oh
somebody?
man, no way.
That's like
LinkedIn subtle
that's the
burn.
ultimate bully. So yeah, it's a vote in the direction of just do stuff and, don't worry about the results. The results will come. But the first banger here I want to unpack, and I know we had a pre-call and we talked about some specific ones, but then I was, getting all of my thoughts together last night and writing out questions, and I picked some new ones. So hopefully you're prepared. Well, you wrote them, so you should know. You should know what you're talking about. But the first one is, and I'm going to read these because we'll put them in the show notes too, screenshots of these posts, but I'm going to read them for our listeners that are, just doing the dishes or whatever in the background. But the first one is, a college grad on Reddit just solved their inbox problem by blocking every .edu email domain in Gmail. That's how exhausted they were from the tidal wave of college marketing emails, most of which they never consented to. Sometimes outreach feels relentless. If your audience is literally blocking .edu, it's no longer just a marketing issue. It now becomes a branding reputation issue as well. And you have some check boxes here. Respect inbox space. Get permission, not just access. Make your messages worth receiving, because if Gmail filters don't block you, the students certainly will. And I like that. Okay, I like this for multiple reasons, but I want to start on reason number one why I like this is that I see that you are active on Reddit, which
Oh
I'm
yeah.
very encouraged by. So tell me about, we'll sidestep from the content of your post here and just talk about Reddit for a second, but like, how
Sure.
are you utilizing Reddit? Because not a lot of colleges are tracking these threads.
Yeah, I mean, I check r/applying to college pretty regularly. There's a Reddit community or a subreddit community for pretty much like everything out there. And honestly, that's one of my favorite places to see what's trending, what students are actually saying. You're not getting a polished answer. That's honestly where I first saw the post about someone blocking every .edu domain in Gmail was r/applying to college. Reddit, I feel like, gives you this very blunt, very unfiltered view of, specifically in that community, what the application process actually feels like for students. So you can quickly see from, students' keyboards themselves, what's confusing, what's overwhelming, what, higher ed has thought that they've explained clearly in marketing, what's still unclear, very clearly what is unclear. So if you read through enough of those threads, the messaging exhaustion and decision fatigue is very obvious. Those are two very big trends I've seen in that thread specifically. And so there's just so much outreach and so much repetition and not enough clarity about what the student is supposed to do next. And we can think it's like, okay, they're going here and they're going here, then they're doing this. Students aren't like that anymore. They're not doing things in a linear fashion. And I think we get too tied up in thinking that they do still do things in a linear fashion. And so, like, what's wild to me about Reddit is that most institutions aren't looking at Reddit, or they don't think to check at Reddit. And I'm usually not one of those people where I'm like, well, if you're not on this, then you're missing out. If you're not on Reddit, you're missing out. Like, genuinely,
Seriously.
it is like having a focus group without having to moderate the focus group. And if you actually paid attention to it and did some research on Reddit about what is being said, I think higher ed would communicate very differently with the insights learned directly from people saying it and interacting with higher ed or your institution. There are subreddit communities specifically for institutions. WVU has one. I've seen people on there talk about housing and dorms and scholarships and parking and campus safety. I mean, like, those are all things that you can be using in your content. That's a gold mine that is coming directly from people who are interacting with your institution. So I don't know why higher ed is not using it more. It's a focus group that's literally right there. So
yeah, and it's really the culture of Reddit is it's so anti-commercial to where, like, if anyone sniffs out that you were, I don't know, like paid to write something, you know, positive for the brand, or that you're like the marketer, you know, the product manager that's representing the product that people are complaining about, and you're trying to pretend like you're just part of the community, like, you know, people will sniff that out and like downvote you like crazily.
Oh yeah.
It's marketers and people trying to sell things are highly disliked on Reddit. So what that means is that you're going to get a very honest response from people. Like when I go look at, you know, if I'm going to buy something on Amazon and it's got like, you know, 500 5-star reviews, I'm even skeptical of the reviews that say verified purchase, because if you read how it's written in a way that's like for SEO. It's like,
oh yeah, like something smells a little fishy there.
Yeah, it's written like, when I bought the XT2000, you know, 5 gigabyte something or other. I'm like, no one names the entire model like that in their review. So there's a lot of places where you're going to get feedback that's thinly veiled. You're going to get a marketing plug that's thinly veiled as honest feedback. But Reddit is really where to go.
And you're going to get not good feedback or not good things from students. But then on the flip side of that, you're going to get things that people think you're doing well. There are also shout outs on there about like, hey, this, or like you've got, don't plant influencers on Reddit. Let them do their own thing. But I've even seen students get in there and be like, hey, you know, like this is happening at this time on campus. Who else is going or whatever? Like you've got people also speaking for you on there in ways that higher ed doesn't always need to inject itself. As marketers, we don't always need to inject ourselves in these communities. You know what I mean? Like, there are things that we need to address that are happening in Reddit communities. But also, like, there are so many people on there that are influencers for your institution as well. And you need to take those nuggets and double down on the things that people think of your strengths as well. So it's like a 2-coin on Reddit. You need to be actively listening for both things.
Yeah. So you got all these... back to the content of your post, you got all these colleges. So what made me think about this, because back to what you said about blocking all the EDUs, it made me think about like, if a student's getting all these like emails from EDUs that are irrelevant to them, I wonder how much of that is like cold email, like from schools that buy lists. So if they're of a certain age, now they're getting this wave of colleges that have all bought their contact information and they're trying to set. So like, of course you're going to just start blocking all the EDUs. So I want to ask your opinion, and maybe you have an opinion, maybe you don't, but I'm always just curious people's opinions about effective cold outreach. Like, how would you suggest we do this better? Let's assume this is cold outreach that is happening to this person. What would be your first touch?
Bluntly, I think in a way, cold email in higher ed has just kind of gotten a little out of hand in terms of like, you know, again, I will plug Reddit again. This is something that I saw on that applying to college Reddit. Someone takes the SAT, the ACT, whatever test it is. You know, when you send your test scores off to schools, usually you get that email, you get the student's email or whatever. Student goes through, all 4 years of college, they pick a college, but the other schools still have that email. 4 years later, that student is graduating, and one of those schools is sending them an email about their graduate programs. Like, to me, that is just very unnecessary. Like, that's spamming. Like, I feel like cold email to an extent has been over engineered in the name of scale and attribution and AI. And not every email needs to be tailored down to name, major, zip code, but somehow it still feels like a mass send. But I mean, like, students feel all of that. They're not impressed by personalization if the message doesn't actually help them. So to me, like, I read that on Reddit and I'm like, why? Like, why are you sending that email to someone who hasn't heard from you in 4 years? Like, of course you're going to get blocked. You haven't nurtured a relationship with that person. They haven't expressed further interest in your institution. Why are you not clearing the database from people like that? And maybe that's an easier said than done thing depending on your institution. I don't know. But if higher ed wants to do cold email better, it needs to start with better intent. And I think the goal of that first email isn't to convert, it needs to be to connect. And it should feel like it's help and value. And you might be like, well, like, but, like, I've got my nursing program is ranked like top 10 in US News and World or whatever. And it's just like, that doesn't fit into what they're actually searching for or looking for, though. At that point, like, it might be good information, but it's still spam if that's not the information that they're wanting and it's not valuable for them in that time. And so a better first touch in a cold email might be something simple like, hey, like, you're trying to figure out how to apply or when to apply for financial aid. Here's a quick guide that we put together on the FAFSA deadlines. You have a list of students that have maybe like started or like clicked into a specific web page on, your website about financing or the FAFSA or whatever it is. So like, you've got people who have shown intent that they're interested in that part of the journey of the student experience or whatever. So like, that's it. Like, marketers don't need to be that meme of that guy. And this is just like what I keep picturing. That's like surrounded by a bunch of different red strings, trying to connect like every possible dot to every possible data point about what they know about something. They just need to meet students where they are and give them the answer that they actually need when they need it. Because to me, if every email sounds like a sales pitch, colleges and universities should not be surprised when students start tuning them out, or in this wild case, blocking an entire email domain of .edu. The industry does not need more personalization, in my opinion. It needs more permission, and I think that starts by sending messages that are actually worth receiving.
Yeah, I mean, what would
that
it
was
be?
A big soapbox, so
no,
my
I
bad.
love it. I love soapboxes around here. And I think, and to agree with what you're saying, like, I think permission-based marketing is so much stronger and so much more effective. And especially like if that first touch is like, hey, I'm going to give you some value here. Like, these high school students know, where to go find, they're not going to be like, wow, I got an email from, such and such university that says they're the best. Like,
Right.
Like, it's like that scene in like Elf, where he like walks into the coffee shop and he's like, congratulations, like best coffee in the world or something. So, but like, what is it that students what questions might they be asking at that point that you can answer? And then maybe it's like, hey, if you want more like this, we have a whole course, or we have like, here, join this email list. We'll kind of help you through the college process, even if you don't even come to our school. But something that builds trust more than just like, let me bother you until we like hopefully get you to click something and then maybe on some off chance end up applying.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So your next couple of bangers here, you've got more than one about ineffective blogs, and I liked these as well. Too many university blogs read like they were written to impress a VP, not help a student. Rolling admissions gets explained like a clause in a contract. Campus safety is behind a wall of policies. Financial aid is a speech about access without instructions on how to actually apply for university scholarships or FAFSA. Most students just want to know, am I too late to apply? Will I be safe walking across campus at night? Can I even afford this? What do I actually need to do next? If you don't give them answers, someone else's blog will, and they will apply there instead. So here's the move. Read your content out loud. Would you actually say this to a 17-year-old who asked you a question? Would their parent get it without reading it? If not, rewrite it. Less we believe, more here's how it works. I'm a big fan of this ideology of like not writing to impress the people that aren't your target audience. And it's just like rampant in higher ed, where it's like,
Mhm.
who are you talking to with this? Where have you, I mean, like, have you seen like examples of this, like going wrong?
I mean, not specific examples, but I think just like, if I think about the concept of how we know what students really want to know instead of just assuming those things, because it's very easy to assume. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about, and all my social media folks out there, holla, about social listening is that it only happens on social media. And I get it's called social listening, but I really do like to call it active listening. Students aren't usually just broadcasting, their questions publicly. Like sometimes they ask them in a DM. Sometimes they ask things in the call centers. They ask things over emails. They ask things in info sessions. And I think those channels, they might feel quieter compared to something like social media or like Reddit we were talking about earlier, but they're still full of a lot of signals similarly to Reddit. And I think
Mhm.
we miss a lot when we treat them like these one-off interactions instead of patterns. And so I will get into another example later in the episode about an institution that I think does this well. But when I worked in graduate admissions, we were building content like how to apply for graduate assistantships or what's a fellowship, because not that these things were high ranking SEO terms at the time, because they weren't, but they were questions that we kept getting from students in our inboxes in social media DMs over and over and over again. And we felt, hey, if enough people are asking us these things, why don't we create some content strategy around it? And we did. And we made an entire guide called, how to apply for graduate school at West Virginia University. And that was by far our most downloaded resource. And it was a step-by-step document on, here's what you need to apply. Here's how you get these things. How do you send official transcripts? Can I apply without official transcripts? What is the difference between an official and unofficial transcript? Like all these words that we throw around internally, students don't know the difference between an official and an unofficial transcript more times than not. And we need to stop pretending like they do know those things. And kind of like that's where it goes back to that thing of like, we think that we communicate things clearly because we're in the weeds of these things every day. Think about it without the tunnel vision for a second of, take a first gen student who's never experienced the college process before. Maybe they don't know the difference between those things, and we need to be able to explain those things to them in a way that they understand and they feel empowered to be able to take that next step.
Yeah, it's really hard though to get out of that tunnel vision of like, am I
For
saying
sure.
something in a way that makes sense to me and other people in my industry, or am I saying this in a way that other people are going to get? Like, I think one of the conscious decisions that I made, so videographer is actually a pretty pejorative term in in my in my industry. When people say videographer, it usually means like the old guy at the wedding with the old tape camera, and he's like putting a camera in people's faces and asking them questions about the couple or something, like old broadcasty style. That's kind of like why videographers hate being called videographers for that reason. And so that's why they're always like, I'm a filmmaker or like whatever. But like the thing is like when colleges are looking for a videographer or looking to get a video done, they're not going to type, they're less likely to go into Googling like and type higher ed filmmaker.
Right.
Because they're not looking for a film. They're not looking for some Steven Spielberg, thing.
Right.
So they're most often they're going to say videographer. And even like technically I don't do a lot of the videographing. Like technically my role is I'm an executive producer, which means that I build the teams that do the work. But like still, again, no one's going to type in, I'm looking for a higher ed executive producer. It's too
Right.
technical. That makes sense. But like to call myself a videographer is almost like it's weird for other people. It's weird for other people in the video industry because they would never call themselves that, but it's because they're all worried about what everyone else thinks.
Yeah.
And I saw this one guy speak, I don't know if it was a TED Talk or something like that, and it's always stuck with me. He's like, you got these like people that design chairs, for instance, he's like, they don't design chairs for like how people's bodies actually work, like ergonomically. They design chairs for Chairs magazine, and so that they get so that
Mm.
they get, and they get an award, and all the chairs people, other chair makers pat them on the back, and then off they go. That's just so often we're always thinking about the audience of our peers when
So
we write
true.
things.
Hmm. Yeah.
So the other one that was sort of like the sister post to that to that one about university blogs written to impress the VP was student question: what's it like to transfer here? University blog. Our institution is proud to announce a new strategic initiative around learner mobility. And I think that's super funny. I was just having a conversation with a friend the other day, and she's in higher ed, and she was telling me about it. Like they're launching like a course on like crisis communications, and she
Hmm.
was telling me about like she was kind of like lamenting like what the marketing agency wanted it to call it, and it was like some very convoluted like strategic communications in leadership business, what, like something really really
Hmm.
heady. And I was like, you need to just call it like when shit hits the fan.
101.
Yeah. And I'm like, and she's like, I wish I could call it that, but like, the other people that are, at the university would not fly. I'm just like, man, like when did like, I don't know. I know you can't say like shit in a program title, but like, like why can't we name something a non-academic sounding thing that just makes sense? Because like, what if BuzzFeed were like writing headlines that were like so academic sounding? No one would click on them. The people click on the
Oh,
ones where it's like Britney Spears was doing a weird dance again,
right.
Poor Britney
Right.
Spears. I have a big heart for her. Hope she's doing okay
Britney's.
today.
um,
Yeah, what do you think about that?
I think it's so interesting, right? Because I was thinking about this the other day, and I can't remember if this was something I actually posted or not. So my bad. I think about a lot of things and they just sit in my drafts, and I'm like, nah, okay.
Yeah.
I think about like higher ed and like the need to sound prestigious, and I'm like, why? Like because it's traditional, because that's what tradition has said that we need to do. And I'm not saying that like higher ed needs to be like, oh yeah, like let's use the F bomb and
Yeah.
SHIT. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no, that's a different thing. But like, why are we so caught up in sounding so prestigious instead of sounding clear? And I think, like I think about those things and I ask myself, well, what is the solution to that? How do you even get buy-in to write effectively like that? And I think there's a case for clarity and to defend the outcome. If we want buy-in to write more effectively, then we have to show why a clear version of something works better. And so instead of saying something just like, it's very vague to say, hey, this is more conversational. This is how the kids talk. This is what the slang is. I'm not saying anybody does that, but it's just like an example. Say something like, hey, like students ask this exact question. This version cuts the word count in half. We've tested both of these versions. We've A/B tested them. This one got 3 more clicks than the other one did. And so it's hard, especially for internal stakeholders, to argue with results. And so when we bring stakeholders into real questions, we show them what students are actually asking in emails or on Reddit or whatever, more times than not, they usually get it. They just haven't seen it from that angle before. You think about what internal stakeholders are on top of their mind for them, and usually it's not something that a marketer in the weeds is working on that day. And so you have to be that person that gives a clear answer when someone's trying to make a hard decision. That's what effective writing does. You have to step up to the plate and be that person of like, okay, here's what I'm saying, because I think it was Seth Odell that said this once. It's like, you have to, nobody's just going to give you a spot at the table. You have to make your spot at the table. And I've just loved that for my career. And I think it's very applicable, especially for young marketers that are going from either, entry level to mid level, or people like me that are going from mid level to upper level positions. You have to fight for your seat at the table. And like I said, make the case for clarity and defend the outcome that comes with that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we mentioned Day Kibilds earlier. I think it was her that said in one of her email courses, she was like, with your subject line, don't be cute, be clear. And
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I have always like thought about that, because it's like when I look at like podcasts that I want to listen to, or like when I go to listen to a podcast, it's usually a professional development thing. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts just for entertainment.
Me too.
So I'm kind of like, I want to know what is the problem this episode is going to solve for me. So when the title is something that's like some lofty, like cutesy thing that probably sounded good, but it's not clear like what it is. I can't even think of an example off the top of my head, but like
sounds like clickbait.
yeah. Yeah, it's just like, well, I don't know what you're trying to tell me with this episode, so next.
Right.
That's why like with all our, higher ed storytelling university episodes, like I try to be really cognizant of like how we title them to be like, because if you were to like plug the transcript from this episode into ChatGPT, it'll probably give you this like from this to that, the something 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 of higher ed marketing, and it's just like, ugh, like just like say what it is, just like. Right. So anyways, what school is doing blogging really well in higher ed? Tell me what you've seen.
Oh man, okay. From a WVU grad, I gotta give props when props are due. The University of Pittsburgh admissions department, phenomenal. Like it is one of the best examples. And John, I can give you the link for this in the show notes.
Okay.
One of the best examples I've seen because of how they approach the whole idea of a blog for their school. Like I said earlier, I've seen a lot of blogs, they just treat it like PR light. It's a place to post achievements, kind of like LinkedIn, I guess. Promote programs, like repackage marketing copy in longer form. But Pitt doesn't do like any of that. They treat their blog like a student support tool, and I feel like it really shows. And the topics are really practical too. So like those things I was talking about of things that you're hearing in a call center, things that you're hearing directly from students. They have a few examples of posts that they've got on their website is, what does rolling admissions mean? How do I apply for financial aid? And they're actually blog posts that are written to match the tone and the style of how students ask those questions. They don't take those questions and then like rebutton them up and rewrap them as Christmas presents all nice and neat under a tree and say, okay, well, you asked this, but then here it is all buttoned up again. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting to see that shift from an SEO jammed thought leadership piece to service. And I think that shift is really rare in the higher ed. And the structure is really simple. The headlines are plain. The answers are very clear. Like we were talking about with podcast, it's very like to the point. This is what I'm learning from this. This is what I can expect to know from this. There's no really like storytelling narrative in it on top of it. It just gets to the point very quickly. And I think for the purpose of this admissions blog, that's exactly what it needs to be. And the result is that content really builds trust quietly. And it's not through something that might be quick, but it's through consistency and dedication and patience. And it really shows me that I don't think Pitt is like trying to impress students with their brand voice like the temptation is there to do. They're really just trying to be helpful for their audience, and they're trying to be the department that a student needs. They're trying to put themselves in that shoe. And ironically, that's what makes them stand out. You write about the things that people think are boring, like, oh, like rolling admissions, like who cares? Who cares about that? Students care about that because they want to know what that means. And so I think
I want to know what that means. I don't even know what that means.
In a world of overcomplicated content strategies, I think like Pitt's refreshingly boring in a way. And I think that's what makes it brilliant. But to answer your question, like at WVU, we had different programs that were on, we were a decentralized model at the graduate level. So we had different programs that had different deadlines. And so some have a strict deadline that you could submit your application to, but then others would have this rolling deadline where like you could submit applications. Like there was no hard set deadline. It was just always a rolling deadline.
Got it. All right. I don't have to go to UPitt's blog to find the answer. I'm gonna go there.
I should have said check out the blog post.
I'll go there anyway after we hang up this call. But yeah, I think that's great. Like, because I think if we analyze our own viewing habits and reading habits, like I'm really big on building rabbit holes for our audience. Mm-hmm. And so if you think about like, would you go out of your way to go down a rabbit hole of press releases about anything? It doesn't matter. Like,
Right.
and any organization, any company, any college, like, would you just be like, oh man, I can't wait to hear what they're doing right now? That's why, like, if you approach an email newsletter as an actual newsletter, as like news, a letter about news, it's a terrible idea. Like, nobody
Yeah,
cares. Nobody wants to
right.
hear what you're up to. And I get some of these in my inbox, honestly, from respected agencies in higher ed. And I'm kind of like, really? Like, this is
Yeah.
a whole email about what you're up to today. Like, what are you doing? you know, and it's
Yeah.
like, but when you build a library of, what you're essentially doing when you're building a blog is building a giant rabbit hole that students can get lost in,
Mhm.
and subconsciously they're just being imprinted with your brand on them because they remember you as the school that was really helpful and you gave them an entire content library that could help them through this process.
Yeah, and to your point about agency newsletters, I like that's what I love about working at Ologie, and we have a monthly newsletter, and we're very selective about what we put in that newsletter. If it's not valuable, if someone isn't learning something from a piece of content in that newsletter, it's not going in that newsletter.
Yeah.
Every piece of content in our newsletter has value, and that's just how we've always been. It's just what we've always valued.
Yeah, I love it. That's the way it should be. Okay, last one I want to unpack is, so this post is, how many student spotlights are actually university talking points dressed up in hoodies? I laughed at that.
So true.
And how fast do prospects notice? So about 3 seconds, they hit play, they skim the caption, spot the script before the logo, intro fades. They get the usual suspects. I chose X for small classes, professors who really care, a leadership title glued on for prestige, and then on and on and on. But I like your solution here is swap polish for truth. Open with the wobble. Bombed bio exam. The 2 a.m. mom, I might transfer FaceTime. Start where the stakes feel real. And let the pivot breathe is point number 2. Office hours, roommate pep talk, major switch, show the messy middle, not just the victory lap. And then point number 3, end with the DM to freshman self tip. One practical takeaway, they text their past self. And so you've highlighted this sort of format called struggle, pivot, payoff.
Yeah.
So this is very true. There's like, so often it's just because when I'm scrolling Instagram, I can immediately tell if it's an ad, if they're like, hey, business owners or something like that. If they call out the audience, I'm done. Like,
Oh yeah.
I'm not
Yep.
listening to that. And that was advice from like 10 years ago, like paid ads. Hey, you got to call out your audience so they know you're talking to them. That doesn't work with me, at least.
No,
Because
same.
people I follow don't talk like that. They're not
Right.
like, hey, video guy, or something like that.
Hey, videographer.
Yeah. Videographers. But have you seen a good piece of higher ed content that followed this format?
Yeah, so I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I grew up in West Virginia. I'm person divided, Marshall and WVU alum. And a few months ago, I saw Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. They shared a story on social and their blog, actually, about a student who had been homeless, battled addiction, dropped out of high school, and fast forward, he's now 5 years into recovery. He got his GED. He stepped into a college campus for his first time in his 30s. And today he's getting ready to graduate with a degree in social work. And he's already working as a peer mentor, and he's helping other people work through recovery based on his experiences. And so, like, to me, that's a fantastic example because that's a spotlight because it follows a human arc. It doesn't open with, I chose Marshall because I like the small classes, or I'm one-on-one with my professor. You know what I mean? Like all these different things. It opens with a life that had been through such a real struggle. And so it doesn't just skip to the GPA and the accolades. It, like I said, it sits in that messy middle, and the uncertainty and the effort in the turning point. And the payoff isn't just, well, he's graduating. It's he's using his own journey to help someone else. That's the full arc, the struggle, the pivot, and the payoff. And so it's not a talking point. We're talking about a real person with a real journey. And so when prospective students, especially those who've had non-traditional paths, they see that kind of story. It doesn't feel like a spotlight to them. It feels more of like, okay, like someone else has gone through this or someone else has had this hardship. And even if they don't relate to that entire story, you can pick pieces out of there of maybe like, oh, like I see myself in that, or like that's part of my story too. And it feels like possibility. And so like, why is higher ed not using these stories like that to be able to inspire people to make, like we talk about access all the time. That's a perfect example of like someone who was against all the odds and they overcame it all and now are using that story to better other people and help other people. Like that's an amazing story. And I'm immensely proud to be a Marshall alum after I mean, I'm always proud to be a Marshall alum, but like finding those stories, they can be hard. It's not the easy way out of, a typical story that we hear of, someone, I didn't know where I wanted to go to college my senior year and it was going toward the application deadline and I just stepped on campus and it felt like home right when I was 18 years old and I knew I was going to Marshall. Like you got to dig for some of those stories.
Yeah.
Because there's so much more out there than an 18-year-old who stepped on a campus and it felt like home.
Yeah, and that's honestly what I feel like is the biggest barrier, because I think there's probably two barriers to creating content like that. I think that if someone has landed on this podcast and especially has made it this far in the episode, they probably aren't part of one of the barriers, which is can't wrap their head around like not just saying the marketing speak. Because I think like, as the more I talk to people that kind of resonate with the content that I create, it's like because they get it. Like they're like, yes, storytelling has to be, there has to be a story. There has to be like some struggle that's overcome, some transformation. So I think most of our audience kind of like gets that. But the problem that I see with almost every school that we work with is not collecting stories until they need them. And then by the time they need them, they're on a time crunch. So they're just going with whatever some professor gave them,
Yeah.
and these professors may or may not be having conversations that are going to get below the surface line with students, but
Right.
it does take some digging. You're not going to just get like, look at a classroom full of people and go, who's got the best story here with that? And you're probably just going to go, well, who's got a cool internship? Who's, trying really hard or something like that. Or, I don't know. It's these conversations that you have to like really dig to find out what's really the humanity behind this person and the context for why they're here, and what's their transformation like. And I think we have to teach department heads and professors and stuff like what makes a good story, like what are we looking
Right.
for here.
Good questions.
Yeah. So this was one question I was curious to ask you, is if you were to apply this advice to your own story from your alma mater, what would be that struggle, pivot, payoff for you?
Well, you warned me about this question, so
I did.
so I was trying to think of like, and I don't have anything that's like super like story breaking, like the example I just shared from Marshall. But I was thinking, and like I started college as a sports journalism major, and that was mostly because I liked sports a lot. I've always played sports. I've always watched sports. I've always been like sports. I love sports. And I liked writing. So like, like that sounded like a pretty solid path, even though like I didn't have a real plan. I was kind of just like, yeah, I'm going to be on, the sidelines one day on ESPN and that's going to be my life. And pretty early on, I realized actually that that schedule wasn't going to work, or that major wasn't going to work if I wanted to stay in marching band all 4 years. And so that was something at the time that I really cared about. Like if I had a personality at that point, it was sports and marching band. So in a very freshman year logic kind of way, I switched my major to advertising, like a snap. Like I had this revelation. I went the next day to my advisor and I was like, hey, I'm switching. I didn't have any background in advertising or marketing. I didn't have any like big career epiphany of like, this is what I want to do. I just knew that like I wanted a major that gave me a little bit more room personally. And so like somehow that decision on a whim ended up being like the best decision that like I could have made, because I absolutely fell in love with my major, with the projects that I got to work on, the people that I got to learn from, the way that even, my major in advertising challenged me creatively. And it became one of those things where like I loved it then once I got started working on things, and I still love my career now. And it's something that I feel like is very special to me in my life. Like truly, I could not picture myself doing anything else other than what I do now. I love my current job and I love my career. And Ologie is just like one of the best places to work. Like I'm going to shamelessly plug Ologie, that just like it's truly an amazing company with amazing people. And I feel like God's like really blessed me with a path that I could have never mapped out on my own, but I'm very grateful for this path. But like the best part in all of that is that, I say that I changed my major from sports to advertising because I wanted to keep music a part of my life. And so my internship actually ended up doing social media for the entire Marshall music department. And so even the marching band part worked out of all of that story. So I know that's not like super like pivot payoff, but I do think that's like a little special story to me of like, okay, like I didn't know what I was doing in that moment, like truly, and I just kind of like ran on a whim and it somehow worked out. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a great story. And like, I think we put too much pressure on like the dramatic stories. Like, I lost both my legs and both my arms, and I had to roll my way onto campus or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good
like,
point.
It's like, sometimes it's, we need, stories that the majority of people can, can relate to. That was just such a dumb example.
Is that part staying in the episode?
I don't know. We'll keep it in. but I think that, the reality is like a lot of people don't, they enter college not knowing what they want to do. And they hope they just kind of stumble through it and find their way. And to hear, a story of someone like them that, because, kind of picked a major and it ended up working out. I think that's, really great news, and also to hear from someone that actually is using their major in their, in their career.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like crazy to me. Like I look back and I'm just like, wow, I like really switched my major because I wanted to do marching band. And I'm like, what kind of reason is that? And now I look back and I'm like, oh, thank goodness I made that. Like, not that I wouldn't have succeeded in sports journalism, but there's no way I would have loved my job. Like I love sports so much that it's just like I didn't want that to be my career, and then I ended up finding a career that I loved anyway. So
But the thing is, like, there is stakes in that story,
Yeah,
and that's why it's a
right.
story worth listening to, because like I think people can relate to like what happens if I choose this major and it's wrong,
Right.
So, and I think that's the more important part in when colleges collect stories is like, is there any stakes here? Is there any reason to keep watching and see what happens?
Right.
And that I think is as important, if not more important, than some dramatic thing, some dramatic from to kind of story.
For sure.
Okay, so we've had a great conversation, but I'd love for you to just kind of like put a bow on it for us. What would be your final, word of wisdom to our listeners that kind of sums up our conversation here?
Sure. I think if I can leave folks with one thing and one thing only, I think you don't have to overhaul everything to make better content, but you do have to give yourself permission to try something different. So much, I feel like, of higher ed is in defense mode of what will legal say? What will my dean think? What if it doesn't work? And what if? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I get it. There's a lot of eyes, there's a lot of layers, there's a lot of pressures to play it safe. But some of the best ideas that I've seen didn't start with a brainstorm. They just started with pure curiosity, with someone just saying, like, what if we tried this? Right, what if? What if you did? What if you wrote the email like you were having a one-on-one coffee conversation with someone? What if you had a student story that started with failure? What if your blog post skipped the headline and just gave them the answer? Like those small experiments I feel like are where trust is built and really where innovation starts. And it's like you don't need a full rebrand or a full overhaul. You just have to give yourself some room to be brave. And so if nothing else, give yourself the permission to make the thing that you would want to read. because that's usually the one that works the best.
Love it. Bars.
Boom.
Erin, great talking with you. Listeners, go follow Erin on LinkedIn. She's got, I'm sure, more bangers to come. Erin Field, spelled just like it sounds. Is there anywhere else where you'd like people to connect with you at?
Nope, LinkedIn is pretty much my main platform. Feel free to connect with me, network with me. Let me know, and John, what you thought about the episode. If you want to continue the conversation, I'm always happy to chat. So feel free to shoot me a message.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks so much for being here. This was a really great conversation. Super glad to have you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. 3 things I want to invite you to before you go. Number 1, if you want to know what's working right now in higher ed video, like what videos are getting tons of views, likes, comments, all that, you can get ungated access to our report, aptly named What's Working in Higher Ed Video, a comprehensive guide for higher ed Marcom leaders and content creators. So check it out at unveiled.tv/higheredvideo, and you might want to bookmark it because it's designed to be a resource for you that you can keep referring back to for inspiration. Number 2, reminder to sign up for my free newsletter all about content creation and strategy at unveiled.tv/newsletter. And number 3, follow me on LinkedIn. If you're searching for me, my name is John Azoni. It's spelled Johnazoni. I'm on there all day, every day, for better or for worse, posting regular content and engaging with folks like you. So I'd love to connect with you on there. And with that, we'll catch you on the next episode of the Higher Ed Storytelling University podcast. And as always, I am cheering you on. Okay, bye.